Alright, what's going on guys? Daniel or Spidey here from PotatoLifeGaming, and today we have another imprint showcase video, this time for Eclair or Psion, depending on which you prefer to call it. I do play Psion myself, but sadly mine does not have all 9 major imprints. So today I'm using my friend's Psion, as you can see, and he managed to get all 9 major imprints, so here we are. So first off, I want to thank Yeoui and Nowaruu, who are both very adept and knowledgeable Psion players. First of all, Yeoui for letting me use his Psion for this video, and both of them for helping me understand the different imprints on a more detailed level. So now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into our first imprint set, also known as Darkslayer. So for Darkslayer, the use of Uber Edge and Forged Swords is the main focus of the imprint. Having Uber Edge on almost all the time not only gives you additional damage upon activation, but also has extra damage from mana explosions that deal piercing type damage. That being said, let's take a look at the 1 out of 3 set effect for Darkslayer. So the 1 out of 3 set effect increases the Uber Edge gain from the Sword Abides to 3. Basically what this means is that if you max Forge Mastery, it will start off with already increasing the Uber 3 times as fast. And then using the 1 out of 3 imprint set will basically double the rate of increase for Uber gain, because it increases it by another gain of 3. This means you'll gain 6 points of Uber per forge. This also includes forging from a skill that gives psychic blades and hitting enemies. Okay, so moving on to the 2 out of 3 imprint effect, it says while Uber Edge is active, the following skills generate additional psychic swords. And the list shows Bane Sword increased by 2, Phantom Blade increased by 2, and Saber Slash and Spinning Blades both increasing by 1. This means upon activating Uber, it'll basically automatically generate the same list and amounts of the given swords. I also have some advice from my friend Nowaruu, saying that he recommends not spamming the swords forged by Uber the moment you get them. Basically because Uber Edge when used will continue to drain itself, and can only be filled back up once it's completely drained. This doesn't mean not to use them at all, but basically just don't mindlessly spam all of your bides, because you'll eventually run out of the Psychic Blades, and you won't have anything left to refill your Uber gauge faster. So now we've got the 2 out of 3 done, let's go ahead and look at the 3 out of 3 effect. Okay, so the 3 out of 3 set effect says it increases the base duration of Psychic Swords to 55 seconds, and that additional Psychic Swords are generated. This basically just generates Psychic Swords of different kinds after certain amounts of time. A Psychic Sword of Bane Sword is produced every 5 seconds, one of Phantom Blade every 7 seconds, Saber Slash every 10, Spinning Blades every 15, and Vortex every 25 seconds. This effect honestly looks really cool, and it's all about building and spamming Uber, meaning with the cooldown reduction, Uber lets you use things like Excalibur much more often. So here you can see all the swords being forged, and you can really use Sword Abide so much more often with this imprint. So I personally really like Darkslayer just to spam attacks non-stop without really having to think much of what I'm going to do next. And that's really all there is to Darkslayer. It's basically a great way to have consistent DPS, and even though it doesn't hit quite as hard as other imprints, you'll essentially have an endless combo and never run out of skills to press. Okay, so now that we're done with Darkslayer, let's go ahead and move on to the Gunslinger imprint. So the Gunslinger imprint itself is a bit more complicated than the other two, but let's go ahead and jump right in, starting with the 1 out of 3 set effect. So this set effect says it applies a debuff called Hollow Point to the target with the use of Wild Shot. Each Hollow Point stack decreases the enemy's slashing and piercing resistance by 0.9% for 8 seconds, and stacks up to 10 times, basically allowing you to debuff the enemy's resistance up to 9%. I also like how in the imprint description resistance is spelled Registance, great job there. But anyway, this effect is great for Psion because all of her attacks are either slashing or piercing, letting you do more damage overall with any attack. Okay, so moving on to the 2 out of 3 set effect, it says it adds an additional hit at 200% more attack power to targets hit by fire or wild shot. Then it also says additional hits do not apply or stack Hollow Point. Lastly, it says anytime you use fire, the cooldown of wild shot is decreased by 1 second. So there's quite a bit to this effect, so we'll go ahead and start from the beginning. It says it adds an additional attack at 200% attack power to the target hit by fire or wild shot. So you can see the clear difference here, as the regular wild shot when unimprinted hits 6 times for part 1 and 3 times for part 2. Then with the 2 out of 3 effect, it now hits 8 times for part 1 and 4 times for part 2. It also mentions that the additional attacks that land during wild shot don't add more stacks of Hollow Point. So even though you now hit 8 times, you'll still only get 6 stacks of Hollow Point debuff. We also noticed while testing this, the first and last hits of Wild Shot are the ones that are buffed to do more damage. And when they say 200% more attack power, they mean as if you have 200% of your current attack power. It doesn't mean it doubles the damage of the skill, but nonetheless it does hit much harder. Now for the cooldown reduction. It's pretty straightforward. If you use fire after any attack, it reduces the cooldown of Wild Shot by 1 second. And the really cool part about this is that it applies to any form of fire, including jumping fire, dash fire, and backstep fire, letting you reduce the cooldown of Wild Shot, essentially letting you spam it and keep that hollow point debuff up. So now let's move on to the 3 out of 3 set effect. I think this effect is really cool. Basically, it says that it generates an additional attack by 800% attack power if the target has hollow point and hit by a slashing attack. Then it says the additional attack spends 1 stack of hollow point and each attack has a cooldown of 0.5 seconds. So really quick, before I elaborate on how this effect works, I want to add that it also adds another hit to Wild Shot on both part 1 and part 2. So now Wild Shot hits 9 times in part 1 and 5 times in part 2. I think that's probably something that they just left out during the translation. So back to the actual effect. Basically what this does is when you generate hollow point stacks and use any slashing attack, it'll summon this phantom-like Psion-shaped ghost that will attack the enemy every 0.5 seconds. But each time it attacks the enemy, it will also consume 1 hollow point stack. Meaning at most, it can last a total of 5 seconds since it shoots twice per second and you can have a total of 10 stacks, unless you're constantly refreshing your hollow point stacks. The damage it deals we think ties into Wild Shot. From the testing we did, it always had a similar damage to Wild Shot when only considering the part 1 of Wild Shot. But anyway, the imprint seems to favor not using part 3 of Wild Shot, but mainly spamming part 1. The skill looks really cool, and if you can manage to spam Wild Shot enough while constantly attacking, you can have the ghost consistently damaging the enemy on top of all your abilities. And that's pretty much it for Gunslinger, so let's go ahead and move on to the last and possibly the most popular Psion imprint called Swordmaster. Okay, so like I just said, it seems most Psions use Swordmaster. It deals heavy burst damage compared to the other imprints and is mainly centered around the use of Psychic Storm. Alright, so taking a look at the 1 out of 3 set effect, it's pretty simple. Usually when max, spinning blades shoot out 4 blades and generate 1 Psychic Sword. With the 1 out of 3 set effect, it will now shoot out 2 additional blades, allowing you to shoot out 6 blades instead of 4. On top of that, it'll generate a Psychic Sword when used, and another one when the blades return, giving you 2 Sword buys for that 1 attack. So now for the 2 out of 3 set effect, you now gain 2 stacks of Saber Slash that can be used back to back. Not only that, but Saber Slash's range is also increased. Each stack also has a 5-second cooldown, but the second stack's cooldown will not start regenerating your second stack of Saber Slash until the first one is completely off cooldown. This basically means that if you use both back to back quickly, you'll need to wait 10 seconds before having 2 stacks again. The set effect description also says that each attack now has 50% attack power, but after a lot of testing, we ended up agreeing on this being changed at some point, because Saber Slash now hits harder and each stack is considered its own attack in the damage report. Saber Slash when unimprinted did less damage than imprinted, and each stack of Saber Slash hit for the same amount of damage. But regardless if this was changed, removed, or is this a translation error, the addition of 2 stacks of Saber Slash is very useful and makes a great filler. Okay, so now for the 3 out of 3 set effect. This is what really makes Swordmaster so strong. This set effect changes Blade Dance to a very strong burst skill. So while still giving iframes and Ultra Break, it now does 600% of the skill's initial total attack power that the skill provides. And when paired with Psychic Storm, it will pretty much melt enemies. The spam of iframes, Ultra Break, and heavy damage makes Psion so ridiculously OP during Storm state. So if you plan to use this imprint, I would heavily recommend maxing Psychic Storm, because at level 1 it cuts multiple attacks cooldowns in half, and at level 2 decreases Blade Dance's cooldown by 15 seconds. I'm not going to go too into the skill, but at level 4 it also adds another 6 seconds to the total amount of Storm, which basically makes a huge difference because it's another 6 seconds of spamming Blade Dance. Another really cool thing about the change with Blade Dance is that you basically gain a giant iframe circle after its use. So as long as you remain in the circle, you'll have iframes. Even if you need to walk out for a moment because maybe you dropped your wallet or something over here, you can go right back in the circle and continue having iframes. And alright guys, that's all of Psion's imprints and how they differ from being unimprinted. They're all very different, very useful, and fun to use. Once again, thanks to Nowaruu and Yeoui for helping and guiding me through how these imprints work. Let us know down below if you play Eclair and which imprint you like the most, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye!